any questions for the presenters here?
Just wondering, to what extent did the client, GSA, buy into this whole BIM process?
I have to say, GSA is one of those clients that is open to BIM, so it was very easy in that sense to work with them. Because that's a very interesting point, Alan, is that when we come back to the EIR, for example, as a BIM manager, I suppose it's my responsibility as well to make sure that the client understands what they're looking for. And so there is also a process really in this BIM level 2 implementation process to actually educate the client, and this is a very, very critical aspect of it. But we found the GSA with previous experience, background, so it was easier to work with this. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well, Antonio. And I suppose at the end of this process as well, they are reviewing the information that they need for COBE, which is basically just putting how much information they want within the model. I think at the start, and I think someone mentioned it in one of their speeches, that clients can ask for everything, and they may not necessarily need it all or want it all, but you know, it all goes in at the start. And then they've actually been looking at it and refining that and saying, do we actually need all this detail in the model? And we're working with them on that to just refine it to what is going to be useful to them.
Could I just ask a supplementary question, Naomi? As a client, were they experienced in defining what they're looking for, or are they in a learning mode themselves?
I think they are in a learning mode, but they have a couple of projects that they did before this one, where they had a model and a BIM level 2 model, so they have learned. You know, so and I think they're going to keep refining it as they go along. As I mentioned, they're mainly using it for asset information, but they want to get more involved with using it for facility management, which is which will be a big thing for them.
I think you will recall years ago, facility management in the UK presented at one of the breakfasts, and they went through COBE and they said, we begin to realise we really should concentrate on the things we should have in every van, not the actual things that never break. Essentially, that is what they were doing, driving around from school to school, fixing doors. Doors were a big problem, obviously, in schools. Any other question?
I might just take the opportunity to introduce Damiano and Ed from Bart Mahoney. They were the structural engineers involved as well, if anyone has any questions for them.
Alex, go
Hi.
ahead.
First of all, I love this graphic. I think that's very, very, very telling. So it's great to hear you're taking advantage of some of the UK processes that have been established, etc. So how are you looking to sort of optimise that journey now going forward? So with particular focus on LOD and levels of development.
The point, one of the points I was making during my presentation really is if we look at the evolution, the way technology has developed in the last good few centuries, and you look at your BIM 2011 strategy, okay? So you're looking really from 2011 up to 2010, move from BIM level 1 to BIM level 3. So it is quite challenging. It is quite challenging. Basically, what as I mentioned before, it is it's very critical to produce a model production delivery table at the very beginning into an EIR. And then when you go into a BP, you really have to fragment this the element of the buildings and see what is the level of development, the level of information that you really need. And also, when it comes to COBE, it is critical to take COBE into account as well. So that's where we are at the moment. Really, we are looking at what we delivered. We are looking at, I spoke to Damian before, and everyone say, Damian, next project, we're just going to work on the cloud, you know, BIM 360. I think it is a better way of communication. As you were saying, that's the level of development that we want. And also we use a BIM toolkit. It's quite useful. And by clicking at the only class of each one, it really gives you an idea of what is required in terms of level of details, level of information in each stage of the project. So if I can put it into this way, we are not trying to reinvent anything. We are just trying to get on top of the game of what we have at the moment. And as Einstein used to say, learn the rules of the game and be the best. I would just say, just do your best. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I think crucially, Antonio, you are saying that you believe going forward you will be using BIM on everything.
Yeah, if you really, going forward, actually, if I can say here, maybe in these days, you say you're talking about BIM level 2. Quite often you say BIM is the future. I would say BIM is actually the present. We are delivering asset. So actually the future, I'm not sure if it's BIM, if it will be called BIM. Just my observation, yeah.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Ralph.
I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but Sean, I appreciated your comment at the beginning about the drawing and the tools of communication, and I suppose, and the historical development of communication tools, and how for many, many years architects and engineers have communicated through two-dimensional drawings, specifications, schedules. You know, so you described the building through 6 or 7 media, one building, and now we have the technology to describe a building through a model where all the same information is sort of input once rather than into 7 different media and managed in one place. So that in itself brings enormous efficiencies, and I think people also forget that, you know, if you've studied as an architect for 6 or 7 years, or an engineer, you understand drawings, but for 90% of people, like, a drawing means nothing. Yeah, they might as well be looking at a piece of paper with black marks on it. You know, they don't really appreciate it. So the communication tool of BIM is, you know, is a great advancement, and it's been there for 20 years. But why is the industry so reluctant to adopt it, in your opinion?
Well, I'm certainly not proclaiming any expertise in the daily practice of BIM. And like Gareth Fitzgerald, you know, I keep asking myself, you know, if it were, I know it works in theory, but does it work in practice? No, but your general point, I think, is probably one of great interest to me. And on a kind of a slightly lighter note, one of the byproducts of the UCLA St. Gallen digitizing project was that it spawned a series of games. You can actually check it. This company developed a gaming system based on a very considered scholarly interrogation of a set of 9th century drawings. And my colleagues in Henry J. Lyons showed thermal modelling at the early stage of the central bank. they've actually recreated what the microenvironment of the refectory in this ideal plan might be. But in the gaming, which is pitched at children mainly, a child could elect to go as a visitor, can go as a scholar, a student or a monk, and go through and discover different stories along the way. So I suppose hidden behind the layers of that simple parchment drawing are layers of history. There are layers of meaning, layers of implicit values. It was touched on today, what in fact were the prevailing ethos in relation to labour, in relation to values. They can be read in every drawing. BIM to me has the huge potential not only to be a medium of communication, but it also is a fantastic capacity to record in the present, but also record for the future what those values were. So I think that it has been a major leap in terms of the capacity of a drawing, whether it's digitally generated or drawing in parchment, to do precisely that. And I suppose as one gets older, as I am, you keep reflect on the value of that, because what I see, and I mentioned I don't know whether it was audible or not, but talking to my colleagues in the Architecture Archive, and certainly the early generations of loss, huge loss of drawn information, which is not simply about the drawing, it's about what that project was about and what those lines meant to the people who drew them and to the people who intended them, and what values and stories they told.
Okay, any final question? To you goes the pleasure or the privilege of asking the final question, so make it meaningful.
No pressure. So,
No,
just a continuation of Sean's discussion there. When you have a BIM model, you have a very you've built a very detailed performance model of a building, an engineered model with the components modelled in the way that it's anticipated they will be built. At completion of the project, is there a continuation? So does the performance of the building, can that be measured post-occupancy? So for instance, can you check the assumptions that were made about environmental conditions within the rooms, temperature, humidity, overheating? Can you check other things like, how the occupants are engaging with that building? Is there any kind of post-completion way that you can validate design decisions and then use that learning to bring it to the next building or inform activities within the building? So it's kind of measuring that performance gap, the difference between design assumptions and actually the operation of the building.
Yeah, as part of BIM Level 2, we have the soft landing, which is a period of 2 years where the client, public client, they really want to monitor if the money was spent. And yes, your question is very interesting. Yeah, there are studies at the moment on the go. If I'm not wrong, there was a case study on the museum in Copenhagen. I'm not 100% sure if it's the right city. But yes, and it will become more and more normality, I think. It is very important to see the workflow, the occupancy, as in other words, as your point, we have a room for a specific scope. I suppose the room actually never been used. Maybe the room can be redesigned or renamed to a different use. So yes, that's I haven't done myself. I know there have been research on it, and it's definitely one of those things that, as I said, who knows in the future how we're going to call this BIM process now, but it's definitely we are going in this direction, yes.
Anybody else on the panel want to comment on that, on validation of design, Zora from Barrett Planning?
Is he throwing this shy?
No, the only thing that I would like to add is
Talking about the level of details that you mentioned earlier, sometimes we work usually on millimeters. Sometimes we receive a phone call Friday evening saying, look, your model is off 1 millimeter. Fair enough. But the point, this is something that I call a surreal situation, because all the process, all the building process, I don't know actually if it's ready for the beam. In the meaning that these, we're talking about level of details, level 2, level 3, increasing all the information. There is a lot of information linked to the model, but at the end of the story, the most of them are all, we are required to provide information. But the weak point of all this project is actually the information, because from my experience here in Ireland, most of the time, one side we have a phone call saying, okay, we are off 1 millimeter, or we are talking about millimeter, but on the other side, we are just starting pouring foundation, but we don't know anything about what's going on the upper floor. It's coming from Italy, where we can start the building site if you don't have all the repart drawings or everything from Amiens, all the consultancy office, all the packages should be ready. And sometimes here we start building, but we don't know exactly where we're going. So it's quite scary from one side, and on the other side there is a level of precision, level of detail required. The beam, it's an opportunity, it's a tool, but I think we need to coordinate with the whole process of the building, construction, and general market in Ireland, in my humble opinion. Thank you.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. I think the world I came from, there was no question everything was fast-tracked, and you needed to use intuition to guess where you were going. And there was a lot of corrections made in the intervening period, but you did actually gain the critical time, which was the big parameter. I think I'm going to bring the gavel down on this morning's proceedings, but just before I do, can I thank again the presenters, Pat, Owen, Alex, Naomi, and Antonio. And also, I'd just like